sit back and enjoy the Mistress of Horror.
My family bought a penthouse apartment back when I was in high school. We got it very cheap for how nice it was, as in like $50,000 under what it was worth. It turned out that the previous owner was a music producer who had mysteriously vanished into thin air a while back, though eventually the man's body was finally found a year or so later. From the news reports, the way I remember it, he had been horrifically tortured and then shot multiple times. It was a gruesome way to go out, but I'll spare you the details. It's real sad stuff, and I'll keep my location and his name private out of respect for the family. Anyways, we bought the place from his mother, who just wanted to be done with the whole thing. I didn't blame her. My stepdad and I started going to the apartment daily to work on it, but I always felt uneasy about being there, as if someone was watching me the entire time I was working. One day, my stepdad went down to the car to get some tools and left me alone. As I was there by myself, working on some sheetrock, I looked down the hallway that led to the master bedroom where the murdered man once occupied. The next thing I saw still gives me chills to this day. I kid you not. I saw a bright white silhouette appear from one side of the master bedroom walking to the next room. The apparition stopped in the middle, turned, and looked straight at me. It felt like it was staring into my soul. My blood felt like it was ice in my veins. I froze. It didn't feel like an evil demon or whatever, but it definitely felt like it didn't want me there. The ghost looked like a male, and after we had our stare down for a few seconds, he then walked to the other side and disappeared completely. Needless to say, I freaked out and bolted for the elevator. This happened during the middle of the day, so it was bright, as none of the windows had shades or curtains. Therefore, I knew what I saw, but my stepdad refused to believe me and actually laughed at me for quite some time after. That didn't help. A couple of days later, while we were tearing down some built-in shelves in one of the bedroom closets, we found a notebook belonging to the previous owner. In it, we found some love poems, unfinished lyrics, and sketches. My mom told my stepdad not to throw it away so that we could give it to the man's mother. My stepdad, being the jerk he was, threw it away anyway. After he threw it away, the creepy stuff started happening to everyone. Lights would turn on and off. All of the windows in the apartment that we had closed the previous day would be wide open the next day. These were hurricane-force windows, by the way, the kind that have latches and keys to them, so it was impossible for the wind to have opened them. We would hear voices that weren't coming from any of us. We'd hear knocking at the door and no one would be there. Doors would slam shut on their own. My mom and I stopped helping with the renovations after all of this, and my stepdad hired some guys he knew to come and finish up the repairs and renovations. These guys lived pretty far away, so my stepdad told them they could stay in the place while the repairs were being done. They only lasted 2 days. On their second night there, they called my stepdad in a panic saying they were done. He said they heard things, saw shadows, and all of their alarm clocks were going off at random times they hadn't set. My mom decided that was the final straw and eventually called in a priest to bless the house. We then burnt sage all throughout the apartment for a couple of days with the windows open to cleanse and clear the apartment of any bad energy. All of the activity stopped after that, and the place felt calm, finally. A few years later, I ran into one of the guys that had stayed overnight there and asked him what had happened that spooked him and the others. He said the doors were slamming in the middle of the night, full-on disembodied voices, scratching, windows banging open and closed, shadows that looked like people running up and down the halls, and they heard what sounded like things being thrown out in the laundry area. He said it was the scariest experience he had ever been a part of and wanted nothing to do with it after that second night. He said he ran out of the apartment in his underwear and slept in the van until morning. Being older now, I realized that we disturbed his home and the last place he felt safe before he was murdered. My stepdad throwing that book away angered him, and I think he was expressing that rage. I just hope he was able to move on to a peaceful place because it seemed like his time on Earth wasn't so peaceful. Everybody in town knew Jack, I think. He was a frail old guy who you would often see wandering the streets. As far as I know, he didn't have a home. He had a very distinctive look and was very thin. About 20 years ago, on a bitterly cold winter night, Jack went to his brother's home and knocked on the door. Unfortunately, the door was locked, and everyone who lived there was either gone or asleep. Jack laid down in the front yard, and eventually, he froze to death. Everybody thought it was a shame, but also thought it had only been a matter of time before something like this happened. He hadn't looked healthy in a long time. 2 or 3 years later, I had been visiting a friend and went home well into the night. I was walking down Confederation Trail, a provincial pathway that used to be a train track until the early 90s. As is usually the case, I was looking at the ground as people often drop money around these parts. Whenever I came to a spot where the trail intersected with the road, I looked up to make sure I wasn't about to be run over. At one point when I looked up, I saw a guy standing on the trail up ahead. He looked like Jack. I immediately told myself not to let my imagination run wild. It was dark, and my mind has always tended towards thoughts of the fantastic. When I got closer, surely I would see that this guy likely didn't look anything like Jack. I resumed my normal walking pattern. About a minute later, I looked up as I passed him to reassure myself that my mind had been playing tricks on me. If it wasn't Jack, it was his unknown twin brother. He had the same thin frame, the same haggard profile. Even his posture was the same. He was standing there, facing away from me, unmoving. Chills ran up and down my body. Instead of saying hello like I had intended, I increased my pace to the point where I almost was running. Every time I looked back until he was no longer in sight, several minutes later, he was still standing in the exact same position. It's been a number of years since this has happened. Sitting now in the comfort and safety of my bedroom, I try to rationalize it, to convince myself there is no way I saw what I thought I was seeing. At the same time, though, I was completely certain I was an arm's length away from a dead man. Well, I should give you some background information before we get into this. It was 2004, and my friends and I were in 11th grade. If I were to describe us back then, to say the least, we were complete idiots. There were 4 of us. I will use their first initial for privacy reasons. There was A, D, M, and me. This story will be told from my perspective. One day at lunch, we were talking about random scary stuff and stories. So I add my 2 cents in and tell the story of how my mom and her friend used a Ouija board once. I explained how she can't talk about her experience because of how crazy and terrifying it was. The only thing she ever told me was in the form of a warning. 1. Don't ever touch or use one. 2. If you're idiotic and don't listen to me, don't ever bring one into this house, or you'll open a portal to the dead or the underworld or whatever she said. I forget the exact words. Well, being the dumb kids we were, of course, we all called bullshit and go buy one. We waited about 2 weeks to mess with it because A's parents were leaving for the weekend. It was probably around 9, maybe 9:30 p.m. on Friday. We lock the doors and turn off all the lights. Then we head upstairs to A's room. We light 4 candles and open up the board and start messing around with it in a mocking manner. Since it's A's house, we let him do the controlling. However, we are all coming up with questions to ask. First, A asked, "Is anyone or anything here?" It moves to yes. I think it's A screwing around, but whatever. I'll go along and ask a question. I asked, "How old are you?" It responds with 16, 17, 17, 17. That is exactly our ages. A goes again and asked, "Are you a guy or a girl?" We get no response. He then asked, "What's your name?" Still, no response. D finally asked, "Hey, are you still here?" After a moment, the planchette flew to yes. That's when I heard the first noise. It sounded like a door opened and closed, but it wasn't very loud. No one said anything, so I figured I was just being paranoid and I was just scaring myself. Getting excited, D asks another question as it seems to respond to him. Are you female or male? It replied with, neither. At this point, I'm starting to feel really tripped out, but at the same time, I'm actually pretty excited. A can be a real jerk, so I figure he's still messing around. I ask, are you evil or peaceful? It spells out D-E-M-O-N-I-C. Demonic. Now we're all getting scared, and this felt too real. Well, everyone but M was getting spooked. He's pretty calm this whole time. Before we could stop this, M commanded the demon to prove it. He actually said, prove it. We all sat in silence, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, one candle is blown out. I'm pretty over this, and I'll admit it, I'm scared. Everyone is screaming, oh my god, let's get out of here. M goes on a rampage and starts calling the demon out with the worst names he could think of, basically antagonizing him to do something more. Suddenly, we all hear noises from the hall when no one else was home. Just loud bangs like someone was stomping on the floor and hitting the walls with extreme force. This can't be real, but how are we all hearing the same noises? A goes for the light, but it doesn't come on. The whole time, M is still talking shit. I knew it was you, A. You and that demon are both cowards, etc. D finally stands up, and stands there, and in the most evil, demonic voice, like nothing I've ever heard before, says,
You want demonic? I'll show you demonic.
We all stop and stare at him, wondering what just happened and what the hell just came out of his mouth. But he doesn't do anything. He's just standing there in a trance or something. Now we all kind of spread out and form a triangle around him, trying to wake him up. After about a minute of trying, D turns slowly and stares at M for about 15 seconds. He starts screaming loudly in this demonic roar. I mean, it wasn't even really a scream. I can't describe it. It sounded like 10 different voices all screaming at different pitches at the same time. He begins attacking M with his nails and starts biting him around his chest and neck like a wild animal. I've never seen eyes as black as his before he began his onslaught. I try to move and help him, but I'm honestly frozen. A is freaking out and kicks D in the face and continues to kick him until he stops attacking M. Now, D puts the blitz on A. I finally unfreeze and I move slowly towards the light. I'm desperately flicking the light over and over again, but it won't turn on. I move to the door and it won't budge either. We're trapped in this room with my friend attacking all of us one by one. I find a weapon somehow. I don't even remember what it was, but before I get attacked, D suddenly stops and walks to the door, opens it, and walks out. None of us are really sure where he went. I go over to M and he's in really bad shape. A chunk of his cheek was gone and he was bleeding a lot from his neck. A isn't that bad. He fought him off well, but he had a lot of scratches and a few bite marks. We decide to call 911. Obviously, we don't explain the situation fully. We just tell them to hurry and that people are hurt badly. At this point, we're all locked in the bathroom waiting for the police. We hear footsteps all over the house with some kind of loud growling noise. To be completely honest, I can't tell you if it was A's dog or D looking for us. The police finally show up and enter through the wide open front door. We suppose D left through that door even though it was locked before. They search the house from top to bottom, but D isn't anywhere to be found. The board is also nowhere to be found, and we never saw it again after that night. M goes to the hospital as he has the worst of it, and A refuses medical help. He comes to my house to sleep over until his parents return home. So, M's parents go to the hospital and stay with him overnight. He's allowed to go home the next day. M and his parents return home. The police had been searching all night for D and still hadn't found him. His poor parents were completely confused as to why D would ever do anything like this. When M went upstairs, D was finally found. M found D dead in his bathroom, in the tub. He had apparently set himself on fire, believe it or not. There was no suicide note, just a scorched bathroom, and D. I'm not sure if D was depressed or psycho. I don't know if he wanted to scar us for life and then take his own life. It should be noted that he was never showing any signs of being psychotic or suicidal, but I guess some people don't. I don't know if D was truly possessed by a demon we stupidly tried to contact and mock. I just don't know what to believe. A and his family moved 2 to 3 months later because of what happened there. Not to mention, they continually heard loud footsteps, noises, growling, and other unexplainable shit. He moved about an hour away. M hasn't been the same since, and he never will be. He still has scars to show it. He's a heavy drinker and a pill popper now. I feel like we'll hear of his death pretty soon the way he's going down the drain. I honestly can't blame him. I'm still pretty screwed up over it too. I mean, I swear to you, this all happened within maybe 30 minutes. We were all 100% sober, and to this day, I have no idea what happened that night. I'm not in contact with either M or A. My advice to you, for what it's worth, don't use a Ouija board. It's not a game, and it's not a toy. I lost my friends that I'd grown up with since elementary school over it. I lost part of my sanity. I lost part of my childhood. I'll never, ever forget that Friday night, and the call that I got from M the next morning telling me what happened to my best friend.